Hey everybody, Elizabeth and Nader back with you, Jersey First TV and the Nader Narrative. Tonight's subject, difficult, painful to talk about, but so important after the awful school shooting in Texas. I wanted to bring on somebody who has a wealth of information to give us regarding what we can do going forward. Jonathan Gilliam, welcome to the Nader Narrative.
You got it. It's good to be here.
Well, your background is beyond impressive. I'm sure people watching will recognize you from being on Fox News. You have also stood in for Sean Hannity on his radio show, but you're often brought in to talk about threats, national security threats, domestic threats. Your background, fascinating. Former Navy SEAL, former federal air marshal, former special agent for the FBI on the Joint Terrorism Task Force. So you know what it is to assess a threat. You know what it is to look at how to do something better and to save lives. So we've got to talk about this school shooting. And that's really where I want to start, Jonathan. What happened in Texas? 19 children, 2 teachers, May 24th, killed by a gunman who was in the school for 77 minutes. Jonathan, take us there. Tell us what went wrong in your opinion.
Well, what went wrong started way before the day of the actual attack. I'm going to use 2 other examples to show you what exactly led up to the possibility of that attack in Texas being achieved by this attacker. So let's look at the Aria Grande concert that where there was a bombing in England several years ago. Back in, I believe it was 2017. I may be wrong, but it's right around those dates. So the attackers did their surveillance of that area long before they carried out the attack. They do what's called a target package. So they looked at the facility, and they, throughout their targeting of this facility, they looked at things like critical assets. What is it that they want to hit that is going to bring them the biggest bang for their buck? So if they just go and killed one person, they're not going to get any headlines at all. Now, I know this sounds very odd for people that I'm talking about killing in almost a scientific manner, but this is the way you do a proper threat assessment, right? Because that's the reality. This all starts with the failure of doing a proper threat assessment, right? So these attackers did an assessment of this arena, and then they determined that the critical assets were the people. Of course, they wanted to hit people. Then they wanted to pick a place where they got the biggest bang for the buck. So they chose a critical area where people gather after the concert, where they come down the escalators, where they get picked up, and there's massive amounts of people. If you've ever been to a stadium arena, this is predictable. And so that's what they did. They looked at it and they said, this is where people will come out. And then they chose the time, which with a concert is not difficult to know when the concert's going to end. You literally can hear it or sit across the street and watch. And so they chose the most critical time for the most critical area in order to strike the critical assets that they wanted to hit. And then they exploited the vulnerabilities. The vulnerability was they didn't have to go into the stadium and then deal with their security to try to get a bomb into the stadium. They just simply waited outside, because the nature of the soft target, the nature of the unawareness of the citizenry, and the smoke and mirrors by security that stops as soon as you step out of the arena, they knew they could exploit those vulnerabilities. And so that's what they did. And they determined that their avenue of approach would just be to go right into the middle of the people when it was that critical time and blow up a bomb. And they killed massive amounts of people, right? It's that simple. Another example of a target package. Now, remember, I'm telling you how the targeter or how the attacker looks at a target.
Right.
In Nashville in 2018, April 22nd, 2018, I was on tour with Eric Church as his director of security, and they parked their buses in Nashville at this one particular location. And we weren't there, but this was very close to where they parked those buses. So we heard about this. At 3:25 in the morning, a schizophrenic man with no clothes on walks into the front of a Waffle House and kills 4 people and injures 4 more before a very brave individual fought him for the gun, and then the guy took off running naked. So why do I keep bringing up the fact that he was naked? Well, because you have to realize what occurred in that moment. A schizophrenic individual that is insane took all his clothes off and literally chose a soft target, one of the only soft targets that's available at 3:25 in the morning, where
Sure.
groups of people are gathered. So he was able, even though he was crazy, to look around the city and determine that there is a critical area, and it's a critical time for that area because people are coming there. The critical assets he wanted to hit were people, and they were gathered there. And the vulnerabilities existed because people aren't aware. And Waffle House or any of these 24-hour restaurants have big, giant windows in the front so you can see right in. He exploited all those vulnerabilities and targeted that location and walked straight in, and people were not aware when a guy was walking in naked with a gun. So that's how attackers see things and how they choose these targets. And in order to do a proper threat assessment, you have to think like they do. So you have to look at your facility, you have to look at your life, break it down in sectors and say, okay, this time of the day, there's nobody here, the threat is lower. This time of the day, there's tons of people here, but they're in these classrooms. So the threat is going to be there. And then you look at it from the attacker's point of view. What's the critical assets, the critical areas, the critical times, the vulnerabilities that can be exploited, and the avenue of approach that attacker will take. And then you mitigate all of those. Where you can eliminate the avenue of approach, you eliminate it. Right. Where you can't, then you mitigate the circumstance. And you come up with ways of deterring or ways of slowing down the attacker or ways to bottleneck them so that you know that that person is not supposed to be there. And so that way, go ahead.
That way, Jonathan, I want to jump in there because this is a fascinating aspect of your training. And obviously, this is how our military is trained, our FBI, CIA, special forces, to look at life this way. And I'm certain, Jonathan, that if I went to dinner with you in a restaurant, you would be assessing your surroundings almost naturally. And of course, as Americans, it's not something that we've done. And we're going to talk about your book in a little bit and how you really coach people to do this. But I want you to talk about the schools because that is the soft target that we as a community have not gone through this process well. Would you agree?
Right. Oh, absolutely. Let's be honest. It's not just schools. I mean, we don't have to differentiate schools. Churches, synagogues, overall place of worship. When malls were busy, malls were the thing. Theaters are coming back online. They're a big thing. Even big businesses where you go to work in stadiums and arenas where concerts are still occurring. These are all predictable soft targets. Another example, the airport, most ticket areas are protected. There's a lot of cops around there, but the baggage claim is not. And that's the most predictable place where people are going to let their guard down and there's no security whatsoever. So for all of those, and including schools, what it takes is we need to show the people that they can do their own threat assessments. They don't need to wait for somebody like me, because if I come to your life and I try to determine from an expert's point of view what the threats are on you, I have to first collect the information that you already know. So all you have to do is learn how to look at the information that you have from the attacker's point of view, and then work, reverse engineer that in order to mitigate, lessen the circumstances or come up with plans of action. So that's what did not happen in the schools, right? And we've been doing this ourselves since we were children. It's called the what if game. What if this happens? This is the way I'm going to react, right? You think like the attacker, you turn around and think like the defender. So that was, to my knowledge, that was not done properly at this school. It's not done properly in any schools. So when it is done, people don't initiate the suggestions that are made or that they even come up with. They will do a threat assessment and then they just will not put any of the processes in place. So we have basically a system that tells you don't need to do a threat assessment. It's probably never going to happen to you. That's playing the odds. They have incompetent law enforcement, politicians, and leftist executives in schools that are telling people that they need to concentrate more on gender studies than they do protection. And so all of this leads to a atmosphere where you can simply walk into a facility. That's the problem, is that we are not looking at at anything from the attacker's point of view. People think it's massive amounts of money or it's intrusive, and they will trade that mindset for the safety of children. And so that's what's occurring.
It's heartbreaking. And I as we learn more about Texas, and I was reading a little bit today, first of all, we know that he was inside for 77 minutes. That is an extensive amount of time. But before he even got inside, he was outside. He crashed his truck. He was walking around. So we have a series of protocols, if they were even in place, that completely failed. Jonathan, is it that we don't want to look at life this way, that we're in denial? Is it that the school system, as you said, didn't value a system of protocols? I'd heard that a door latch was broken. How do we get to the point where police are allowing an attacker inside a school and really doing anything he wants for 77 minutes? It's almost hard to understand.
So we have the ultimate trifecta, which I'm actually writing an op-ed right now about this. It's the trifecta of destruction in this nation, and that is politics, it is careerism, and the virus of the leftist ideology that is infected this nation. So those three things are working at the same time. The leftist ideology is pushing forward, and it is injuring young people, and it's injuring the inner city because it's empowering people to forego ethics and morals, and it's confusing young people, right? So that's destructive. You have executives that are more concerned with their careers, which I saw this in the FBI and in the SEAL teams. I saw executives that are concerned with their careers and their pensions, and not concerned, and they believe they know more than the people under them because they have a title. And so they reach the Peter principle, where they reach the level of their own incompetence.
Right.
And then you have politicians that are the same. They're leftists or they're careerists. And we have a Republican Party that is not a warfighting machine. So there's no stance against this. So this trifecta of destruction is whirling through, and it makes things like this possible, where we could do threat assessments. We could implement changes across the board and actually secure a lot of these facilities. But what would happen is a spotlight would be shown on the reasons why these things occur, which I just pointed out. And none of those three groups want a light shined on them in a bad way, because the last thing the leftists want are facts that show that they're injuring young people. And politicians, there was just a conference in Vegas of all these mayors from big cities all over the country. And I'm shocked that mayors like the mayor of Miami, who's a Republican, who I've had discussions back and forth with on Twitter, who I thought had his mind in place, goes and sits at the table with people like the Chicago mayor and says the same thing, that we need to have gun control. And gun control will do absolutely nothing. It'd be the same as if you and I got into a ring to fight, and they instructed us and said, there's no punching. However, whoever knocks the other person out wins the fight. Now, if you follow the rules, you're going to get knocked out and lose, and I'm going to win. Right? So it makes no sense at all when they go after guns. They're only going after legal guns. These background checks, right at this point, as we know right now, they're not doing back checks for mental issues, right? They're checking you. You're not a criminal. You're not going to go out and kill anybody. So you have to wait to get a weapon. But somebody who has a real measurable criminal personality, but is not a felon, they're not going to pop up on that.
So we're failing in many ways before we even get to the soft target. We're failing in all the ways you mentioned, and obviously our mental health system is failing. I mean, these individuals who commit these crimes, this 18-year-old Salvador Ramos, we're going to find out more about him. Definitely mental health issues there. So way before he even decides to do this, we're failing. We're failing our kids, and we're failing in any soft target, as you listed. So there are protocols we could put in place. You would be able to tell a school what to do, but you're saying that the fact that we're not embracing what we already know is the issue.
Yeah, I mean, everything I've said already, and you said, everybody knows. Everybody knows that this gender pressure that they're putting on young people is causing injury. I think everybody knows that, except for the robots of the left.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that schools are not being hardened as a target. Everybody knows that law enforcement has been degraded, that good people have retired, incompetent people have been recruited, and they've become more and more liberal or leftist, not even just liberal, but leftist and incompetent. Everybody knows that, right? So in order to make real changes immediately, or in order to make changes, there's a couple of things we got to do. Immediately, we need to do threat assessments. That's the bottom line. I literally could go on a Zoom call or a call like this with 4 people from every school in the United States, which we could do all the schools at one point, at one time, and I could teach them in 3 or 4 hours how to do their own threat assessment. I mean, then they could go do their own. Then they could implement the changes or the policies, or, you know, come up with ways to mitigate things like lock a door that are free, and come up with issues or mitigation strategies that may cost a little bit of money, and then see if it's in the budget. So that could be done, I mean, tomorrow. I already have the coursework. It could be done that quick. The other thing that we have to do, this is the hardest part, is change the way things are happening now in order to affect the future. This is what the left does, right? But we need to start recruiting for better police officers. We need to get executives promoted in police departments that actually know what they're doing. They didn't just check boxes so they can get to the top. I know people in the FBI who were in for just 10 years, did one case, and they're a SAC, a special agent in charge, because they checked the right boxes. That individual gets to SAC position, and they literally believe in their narcissistic mind that they know more than the people who've been operating for 20 years, right? So we need to get rid of that culture. We need to start promoting good people. We need to start recruiting good people. And then, I mean, this is where politics comes into play. We need to start realizing that you're not hiring a savior to go and save you in politics. You better start hiring people that are willing to get up in front of everybody and say the truth. I am not going to stand for this. Young people are dying. We either fix this or I'm out.
Right.
And then you get the next person to say the same thing. And you get 10 more people to say the same thing, and stand together and get the people to stand behind them. These long-term changes are what must occur, so that in 10 years, it's the norm to do threat assessments. It's the norm to have competent people in office. But as we're doing right now, I mean, if you have a Republican chair that doesn't agree with the competent person that has the response, that has the understanding, the knowledge and experience to be a great leader, they won't back them.
Right.
If they don't like them.
Yeah.
And
or
if they don't get something out of it. So we have no future, and we have no present solutions as of now that are being implemented.
Well, you know, what we're doing to fix that, I think, is parents have had enough on many levels with the school systems before, you know, even the Texas shooting, with other issues. So parents are going to have to demand this. Citizens need to demand this of their parties, party members. We need better candidates. You have to show up. You have to vote. You have to do these things. Someone else is not going to fix it for you. And we need to promote the good ideas and the people that have them. So this is on us to do, Jonathan. And I know that you're somebody who really, you know, talks about personal responsibility and encourages Americans to step forward. I know how much you've done for this country, how much you love this country. I admire your voice with all of that. I want to talk about your book as we start to wind down, because your book, I think, is timeless, very important. It's called Sheep No More. And it's available on your website. It's available on Amazon. But for everybody listening, this is really about assessing threats in your own life. It's the art of awareness and attack survival. Now, that might sound very military and very something that you don't need. But I think if you're paying attention, you'll understand that you have to think this way in life, right? That we need to look around our environment. I found your book so interesting. And I really want you to talk about something specific, which I found fascinating. And I believe that America is getting there, or is there really, which is the comparison to Israel. Now, if you've been to Israel and you've looked at the history, and you talk about this in your book, that Israeli citizens have really been trained by experience to do their own threat assessments in their daily lives. And you say they're doing this increased and heightened awareness, this awareness Bible, like you call your book, without becoming paranoid. It's like just part of their life. I mean, they've been in bombings in cafes and buses, and they have to bus stops. They have to think this through. So,
Right.
Jonathan, don't we need to do that in America? Isn't that a good model for us? And don't we need to learn from them?
So we did this. Yes, the answer is yes to that. And we did this, I would say most Americans a year, maybe 2 years after 9/11, they were very aware and very willing to interact with law enforcement. And then it got a little worse and a little worse. And then COVID occurred and a lockdown occurred. And really, the lockdown was almost like a period of the chrysalis for where a butterfly is created inside the cocoon. Except we came out stupid. I mean, people came out completely lost as what to do. So, with Israel, here's the thing, they exist in an environment where, and they're being affected by leftists as well, but they exist in an environment where you have to serve 2 years in the military if you're a citizen. And while I enjoy that, and I, in some ways, entertain that for the United States, we've always prided ourselves on a military that is voluntary and not conscripted. But the problem with that is that people live in a free nation where they are able to say and do what they want for the most part, at least last year or the year before that. It's getting worse now. But what that causes is the cancer of comfort. And so people, when they have to make an effort, they just don't. So they're driving down the road. I remember going through Times Square once, and I saw when Bloomberg, I was an FBI agent, Bloomberg was in office, and he's giving a press conference, and literally not even 300 feet away, a guy was working on a car with a hood up in the middle of Times Square. There are cops everywhere. They have their Atlas team, which has SWAT guys on it and everything. No one saw that this guy was working on his car. Now, if that is an odd thing. You never see a broken down car in Times Square.
Never.
Right? Let alone when the mayor is speaking.
Right.
So I drove up and I looked at one of the cops. I was like, do you guys even see that guy right there with his hood up in his car? And they were like, the guy was like, oh, wow. So he went over there. In Israel, if somebody pulls up and does something like that at a bus station, I can guarantee you a citizen is either going to interact or they're going to call law enforcement, and they're going to be there immediately to mitigate that circumstance. And here, you just don't see that because we live under a veil of, or an illusion that it's all going to be taken care of, and it's probably not going to happen to me. And while that's the case, somebody always wins the lottery. And if you want to win the lottery of death or mauling, then play that game. But I don't play that game.
Right.
I don't gamble.
Yep. Well, it's like you say, the cancer of comfort. That's a good way to put it. And we just can't be that way anymore. And it's not just schools, as you say. But I did want to ask you, are you available to school systems to do the threat analysis with them? Is that something that you offer?
Yeah, I'm available to listen. If anybody wants to hire me, I'm available. But what I've been offering is that I will do this call for schools across the nation. I would like to get large numbers of schools together, and I will perform this course for free. And all they have to do is purchase the book, and then any follow-on things, we can talk about budget. I'd work with schools in their budget to come in and help them. But by and large, I could teach this course, and then they could go out, do their own threat assessments, and then contact me for further follow-on issues. But even with the basic 3-4 hour course, I mean, they should be able to go out and literally do these things. But I'll tell you, I've said this on radio. I said it on Fox News twice. I said it on Newsmax, and I've gotten 0 people calling me to say, let's do this. And I'm telling you right now, it would stop many attacks. It would mitigate the
Of
devastation
course
at
it would.
many, and it is the foundation for any type of future protection of your children.
Yeah.
People are just not interested in it. And in the book Sheep No More, I mean, basically, it shows you exactly what I teach in the course. I elaborate on it, but you can read the book and learn how to do your own threat assessments.
The book is fabulous, and it's something that parents should teach their children, that everyone should be aware of. And I think as Americans, we don't want to think about these things, but it doesn't make life negative. It isn't something awful. It's something intelligent, and it's a good way to train the way you deal with situations so it becomes natural. It's not as though you're living, as you say, paranoid or in a negative state expecting something. No, in fact, you're being proactive, right, rather than reactive. Right. So to our audience, anyone who has the ability to pull schools together, Jonathan is absolutely as well trained as anyone to be able to help with this. And I would hope, Jonathan, that we're at the point where the conversation isn't just about guns, that it is about all the other things that you listed, because it's not just schools. We as a nation are a bunch of soft targets, frankly. And there are things that are degrading our society and our culture that are going to simply cause more and more mental health issues and more breakdown of things that we used to take for granted. This isn't 1950 anymore. We need to pay attention. And I would hope that really intelligent people would listen to this. At a minimum, get your book. As I say, it's timeless. I know Sean Hannity wrote the forward in your book. I know he's a good friend of yours. Mm-hmm. And he's right that this is it's like a Bible for being aware. It's just something that needs to be part of your training as a human. And we get to the point where we begin to look at things correctly, we can actually change what's happening. We don't have to sit here and just wait for the next shooting, right? Because it wasn't just Texas. Jonathan, there have been a series of them now since then. The medical building. I mean, it seems like it's every day now you hear something.
There's been a stabbing in another medical building. There's been in Philly where they had in this big, inner city thing they were having in the street. A lot of black on black crime is. So I want you to look at this real quick. Terrorism, black on black crime, which includes gang violence, mass shootings in schools, hospitals, churches, or religious institutions, and special events. These are all soft targets. And all of them are being targeted by either terrorists, by young people who've been injured and their minds are wacko because of medications, because what they've been taught through the Department of Education, or they're just emotionally disturbed people. All three of those categories could easily be studied, and profiles of these people could be looked at. And if you want to target somebody where you say, like in schools, for instance, like down in Florida, that guy was the shooter at Parkland High School was known to police, was known to the school, but because of an Obama era policy, they did nothing. So while they could pass a law and take away all the guns from good people, they're still not going to go and find out why is this person crazy and why at such a young age, and why has he not been looked at? And it's all because leftists and politicians they want this. It appears as though they want this country to be crushed, because they're certainly not doing anything to stop it. And I'll just say one other thing. I know I'm long-winded. I'm from Arkansas. Matthew McConaughey gets up in the White House today, and it's all the rage. He gives an impassioned speech because he's from Uvalde, Texas. And he talks about responsible gun ownership. That would do nothing. The home that kid grew up in Uvalde, Texas, is not a responsible home. He lives with his grandparents. His grandfather is a felon. His mom is a drug dealer. Somehow he was able to get an $80,000 truck and two guns that averaged up to about $7,000 with the optics. Somehow he was able to get those things in the house where a felon lives. There's no responsibility in that home. If Matthew McConaughey wanted to talk about anything, he should talk about responsible parenting. Yes. That's what he should be talking about. The gun owners who are responsible make up the majority, almost 100% of gun owners that are legal gun owners in this nation. So this responsible gun ownership stuff has nothing to do with whether or not somebody is going to pick up a gun and go into a school and shoot, or go into inner city and shoot. All of these people are broken individuals who could be identified, and all of them come from broken homes. Every single one of them.
It's amazing you say that, because my show last week was with Eric Carroll from Dad Talk Today, and we talked about the importance of fathers, and we talked about the breakdown of the nuclear family. And this is not that difficult to figure out. This is behind all of it, is that our family structure is breaking down and therefore affecting our culture, and it begins there. We have to look at the right thing. So everybody, this is the book. It's incredible. Sheep No More. It's on your website. It's on Amazon. But I do want people to reach out to you. Maybe some people listening will pull together some schools. Jonathan, how do they get in touch with you?
They can find me at jonathantgilliam.com, or they can just find me on social media and direct message me. But if they write me at jonathantgilliam.com and put threat assessment in the message line, then I will get back to them. I'm telling you, this is not rocket science. If a naked schizophrenic guy can choose a target that is a predictable soft target where people are gathered and vulnerabilities are there, and he exploited those vulnerabilities at 3 o'clock in the morning and successfully killed 4 people, then a sane person who can look at a facility could literally secure the whole thing, if not on paper. They could then take that on paper and then implement what they could and build a relationship with law enforcement and the community in order to stop these attacks from occurring. It can be done.
Well, that's what we need to do. And that's part of the major purpose of what you're doing for us. Thank you for what you do for our country. We had you in New Jersey recently. We're going to have you back. I do hope that people will take this seriously and understand it's time to demand this, not just from our schools, but let's start there at least. Parents who have been standing up, and they have been standing up, they've got to add this to their list. It's time. We need to protect our children.
Let me say one more thing. If all the people that came out because their children had to wear masks, all these moms were out there, thousands and thousands, whole groups of people were created because of that, right? If all those people that were mad about that were mad about the last elections, that were mad about the vaccine, of all these things, if they came together and insisted that threat assessments occur, they would happen.
Yep, that's right. Well, that's what we're going to demand for. We're going to start it, Jonathan. And, we just need the people to speak up, and they're starting to. Our country's on the line. You know that, and I know that, and our way of life. So thank you for everything you do. I could talk to you forever. You're so intelligent. You've used your background in such a wise way to help all of us. And I hope that we're able to see you do more for the school systems. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. God bless this country, and God bless you. And thank you for having me on.
God bless you as well. And to my audience, guys, we'll see you next